Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist and today we're going to be doing an Ice Barrier deck profile. So I'm really excited this week guys because I've gone through some major changes in this deck since the last time I profiled it, and I am super excited to show you guys those changes because they are absolutely insane. I love the way this deck plays, summoning out cards like your Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier, which is one of the most classic synchro monsters in the entire game, and even summoning out cards like Totally Awesome to totally shut down your opponent. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards, like getting your name scratched in a single video, getting assigned cards in the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month to your patron along with test hands. So without further ado, let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're playing 3 copies of Revealer of the Ice Barrier. This card is a great 3-of to play in this deck because it has a really good effect that while you control another Ice Barrier monster, your opponent cannot tribute summon at all. And you can only use each of the following effects of this card once per turn. You can discard a card to special summon an Ice Barrier tuner monster from your deck, and also you can't special summon monsters for the rest of the turn except for water monsters, which is not that big of a deal for this deck to be able to pull off because the majority of the time all you're trying to summon is water monsters anyway. And if you would discard or send a card from your hand to the graveyard to activate an Ice Barrier monster's effect, you can banish this card from the graveyard instead of one of those cards, which is a pretty good effect just to be able to protect your hand and your cards in your hand. We then play 3 copies of Speaker of the Ice Barrier, which I really like as a 3-of in this deck because this card has the ability that while you control another Ice Barrier monster, defense position monsters that your opponent controls cannot change their battle position. And you can only use each of the following effects of this card once per turn. That if you control an Ice Barrier monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. And if you control an Ice Barrier monster, you can banish this card from your graveyard to special summon 1 Ice Barrier token that's an Aqua, level 1, 0 attack, and 0 defense, which is a pretty good effect just to give you an additional token on your field. We then play 2 copies of the Spirit of the Ice Barrier. This card is a great tuner for the deck because while you control another Ice Barrier monster, monsters your opponent control lose 500 attack and defense. And then during your main phase, you can send 1 level 3 or lower Ice Barrier monster from your deck to the grave, and if you do, this card's level becomes the same as the monster sent to let you level manipulate between 1 and 3 to get the exact level you need to go into your synchro plays. We then play 2 copies of Prior of the Ice Barrier because if you control an Ice Barrier, you can special summon this card from your hand to your side of the field, but you can't special summon monsters that are level 5 or higher the turn you activate this card's effect. And you can also tribute this card to special summon or target a Ice Barrier monster in your graveyard and special summon that target back to your side of the field, which is a pretty neat effect just to get you an additional monster reborn in the deck so you can get your cards out of the graveyard to get the exact ones that you need. We then play a single copy of Defender of the Ice Barrier. The only reason that you play this card in the deck is to be able to send it to the graveyard off of Spirit, but it has the ability that while you control another Ice Barrier monster, monsters that your opponent controls cannot declare attacks if their attack is greater than or equal to this card's defense, so they can't attack if they have 1600 or more, or 1600 exact, which is kind of an interesting effect to protect your monsters from being destroyed by battle. We then play a single copy of Strategist of the Ice Barrier as well, that you get to once per turn send an Ice Barrier monster from your hand to the graveyard to draw a card. And then for the last Ice Barrier, I'm just playing a single copy of General Wayne of the Ice Barrier, that spells and traps that are sent from the field to the graveyard by your opponent are banished instead. So all of your opponent's spells and traps are banished instead. And it also has the ability, if your opponent controls a monster and you control an Ice Barrier monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. And if this card is normal or special summoned, then you get to add an Ice Barrier spell or trap from your deck to your hand. But the reason I'm only playing a single copy of this card is because of some of the other tech cards in the deck that really help out the strategy. So for the other monsters that we're playing 3 copies of Swap Frog in the deck. Swap Frog is an insanely powerful card to play in this deck because you get to special summon this card from your hand by discarding any other water monster. And when this card is summoned at all, normal, special, flipped, any way that you summon this card, you're going to send a level 2 or lower water aqua monster from your deck to the graveyard or face from your field to the graveyard. And then once per turn, you can return a monster that you control to your hand to normal summon a frog monster during your main phase this turn, except another copy of Swap Frog in addition to your normal summoner set, which we do play a couple of other frogs in the deck in the form of the single copy of Dupe Frog, which is a card that you're going to be sending to the graveyard a lot with this card effect of Swap Frog because you're going to be able to banish it for your copy of Ronin Totem. Ronin Totem is pretty good in the deck because you get to banish any frog monster from your graveyard to special summon this card back to your field, and helps you kind of turbo out your copies of Totally Awesome to your side of the field. We then play 3 copies of Silent Angler, which is a super easy card to summon to your side of the field that if you control a water monster, you can special summon this card from your hand, but it has to be the last monster that you're going to be special summoning from your hand, but you can't, because you can't special summon monsters from your hand for the rest of the turn after you summon this card this way, which is a pretty good effect, but you're trying to just kind of set up your field, so this is going to be the last one out of the hand. We then play 3 copies of Silent Sea Nettles. This card is a great card for this deck. This card is absolutely insane, because if you control a water monster, you can special summon this card from your hand, but you can't special summon anything except for waters the turn you activate this effect, and you can banish this card from your grave and then target up to 3 water monsters in your graveyard and shuffle them back into the deck, which is a great effect to be able to shuffle cards back, like your copies of your Swap Frogs, your Dupe Frogs, your copies of your Ice Barrier monsters, or even some of your cards that are at 1, like your copies of Trishula that you've already used, which is really helpful for this deck to be able to recover certain cards that you need, which is why I played this card as a 3 of, and also works really well with some of the cards in the extra deck. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're going to be playing just a single copy of Winds Over the Ice Barrier, which I just feel like 1 is fine in this particular build, because you get to tribute any number of Ice Barrier monsters to special summon from your deck that many level 4 or lower Ice Barrier monsters with different names from each other. And then during your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from the graveyard, and then it has the ability to target 1 Ice Barrier monster that is banished or in the grave and add it back to your hand, which is a pretty neat effect just to grab the exact card that you need. We then play 3 copies of Medallion of the Ice Barrier. This card is a searcher for the Ice Barrier archetype that lets you add any Ice Barrier monster from your deck to your hand. That's pretty much the only effect of this card. We then play 3 copies of Freezing Chains of the Ice Barrier. This card is a really good card because when this card is activated, you get to target a level 4 or lower Ice Barrier monster in your graveyard and special summon it. And then while you control 3 or more Ice Barrier monsters that you control are unaffected by the activated effects of your opponent's monsters that were special summoned from the extra deck, which is a pretty good effect to be able to just basically stop your opponent from activating special summon monster effects on your other monsters. We then play for the last 3 spells, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Forbidden Chalice. This card is interchangeable outside with cards like Effect Veiler, cards like Ash Blossom. It's totally up to you what you play in this particular position. I just really like the 3 copies of Chalice to stop my opponent's monster effects, so when I do summon out my copy of Trishula, I can actually just go off against my opponent and just banish whatever I need to. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. So for the traps, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. Same thing as with Forbidden Chalice. You can change these out for Effect Veilers or Ash Blossoms, whichever one you have. And this card is really good to be able to target a monster on your opponent's side of the field and negate its effects. It's a really good hand trap to be able to drop against the opponent and just stop any card that they're going to be activating. And for the last 3 traps of the main deck, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Goes and Match, because this card locks both players into 1 attribute of monster, which we're always going to be summoning water, which is totally fine, but comboed with a monster in the extra deck, this card becomes an absolutely insanely powerful floodgate card to be able to stop your opponent from summoning anything at all. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're going to be playing a single copy of Trishula. Trishula is a great one-of in this deck because Trishula basically is one of the most powerful synchro monsters ever created in Yu-Gi-Oh! Because when this card is synchro summon, you activate this effect to remove from play 1 card from your opponent's hand, field, and graveyard, which is a really good effect. The card in their hand is random, but you get to pick all the other cards, which is just absolutely insane. I love this card as a one-of in this deck because you can only play 1 of it, but it's just such a good boss monster. And especially with your copies of Sea Nettles, being to recur this card over and over and over again, this card is just such a good one-of. We then play a single copy of Trishula, Zero Dragon of the Ice Barrier, which is also another version of Trishula and is a level 11 monster that when this card is synchro summoned, you can banish up to 3 cards from your opponent's graveyard. And if the synchro summon card in its owner's control is destroyed by an opponent's card, then you can special summon 1 Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier from the extra deck or the graveyard. And its attack becomes 3,300 and half the attack of any face-up monster opponent currently controls, and also negate their effects, which is just a really good effect just to be able to to stop certain card effects. We then play a single copy of the Adamantipator Risen Dragite because it negates spells and traps if you control or if you have a water monster in the graveyard, which is a really good effect to be able to just basically stop spells and traps. One copy of White Aura Whale. This card is a really good card to summon on your opponent's turn. You might be wondering how we're going to do that, but there's actually a really neat combo in the deck that you can summon this card during your opponent's turn, and when you do, you get to destroy all monster opponent controls that are in attack position, so it's actually a pretty neat interruption with some of the other cards that we're playing. Play a single copy of Riser Dragon, because Riser Dragon is one of the only cards in the entire extra deck that's not in water. But if this card is synchro summon, you can send any monster from your deck to the graveyard whose level is lower than this card's on the field, and if you do, reduce this card's level by that monster sent. So you can change this card's level to anything that you need it to be, which is really neat. For example, if you send a 4, this card becomes a level 3, and then you can go 3 plus 4 is all the way up to 11, so you can summon out your copy of Trishula, Zero Dragon, which is very easy to do with this particular card. And then we play a single copy of Crystron Quandrax. Quandrax is going to be the way that we're actually going to summon White Aura Whale during our opponent's turn, and it's really easy to pull off because all you have to do is synchro summon into a copy, or link summon into a copy of your Needle Fiber, and then once you summon out your copy of your Needle Fiber, you're then going to banish it during your opponent's turn to summon out the Quandrax, and then once you summon out Quandrax, you're basically just going to synchro summon into White Aura Whale because this card lets you synchro summon during your opponent's turn, and then once you do that, you're basically going to board wipe them, which is pretty insane to do. So for the other cards that we're playing in the deck, we're playing a single copy of number 4. This card is the reason I play Goes and Match, because of this insane interaction between these two cards. So what these basically do together is all face-up monsters on the field become water. And then once per turn, during the main phase quick effect, you can destroy a water monster that your opponent controls. And if you do, inflict damage to your opponent equal to half the monster's attack that it had on the field. But the really neat thing is it turns everything into water, and then Goes and Match makes it so that you can only control one type of attribute. So if your opponent's not playing water and they summon one monster to the field, they currently have a water monster, so they can't summon anything else, which is why the copy of number 4 is so powerful with Goes and Match, which is why I'm currently playing this card as a one-of with a copy of Goes and Match in the extra deck, or in the main deck. It also has a really neat effect that you don't really use in this deck because we don't play any of the other stealth cards in this particular deck. The stealth spawns in the extra deck, so we're not really gonna use that effect. We then play a single copy of Abyss Dweller because Abyss Dweller shuts down graveyards and lets your water monsters gain 500 additional attack, which is pretty good if it has a water monster as a material, which it always will in this deck. 2 copies of Bahamut Shark because it makes it super easy to summon out our 3 copies of Totally Awesome in this deck. And this card is really amazing and basically the main card that you're going to be going for besides Trishula and your copy of number 4. This card is really good because it basically negates anything and sets it to your field if it was activated on the field by just tributing one aqua monster or one frog monster, on your side of the field. It's just really, really good because once per turn during either player's turn, when your opponent activates a spell trap or monster effect, you can send an aqua type monster from your hand or face from your side of the field to the graveyard to negate the activation if you do destroy that card, and then set it to your field, which is just a really good effect if it was sent to the graveyard. And then also the ability, if this card is sent to the graveyard, you get to target a water monster in the grave and put it back in your hand. So you can target Trishula or Zero Dragon and put them back in the extra deck. And then also during the stamina phase, you can detach a material from this card to special summon out a frog monster from the deck, which is also pretty good. We then play a single copy of Double A Zeus just to have a board wipe in the deck, and then a single copy of Needle Fiber in the extra deck as well, because Needle Fiber is basically here to be able to go into that Quandrax combo that you're going to special summon out your copy of Needle Fiber. It's going to special summon out any of your tuner monsters to your side of the field. And then once you do that, if you have any other level 4 on your side of the field when you resolve this effect, during your opponent's turn, you can banish this card and then quick effect special summon any tuner monster that's a tuner synchro monster from your extra deck. So you'll summon Quandrax off the copy of this and then synchro summon into White Aura Whale using Quandrax's effect to board wipe your opponent of all attack position monsters, which is a very neat little combo. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. It's a really fun deck to play with. I really love playing around with Ice Barrier because it's just such a really fun deck that keeps evolving, and it's just amazing all the different cards that this deck has in its archetype. And it's really nice that they actually gave this deck a structure deck to actually give it kind of clear focus to summon out your copies of Trishula and even go into Bahamut Sharks and stuff like that with how easy the water support has been recently. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. It's a really fun deck to play around with, and I hope you guys enjoy the changes that I had made to this deck. And it's just amazing all the stuff that you can really accomplish with this deck. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of the notification squad, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.